Welcome back for another episode of the Even Your Dynasty show. Today's episode, we're going to do it a little bit differently. So, I actually had a request in the comments to do a show talking about the international free agent signings. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read the question and kind of give my thoughts on it. So, the question we got in the comments was, can you do a show on the international free agent signings? Why do the Giants wind up with the 36th and 44th top rated picks? There are 30 teams in Major League Baseball, and this means they will have been outclassed by every other team for acquiring a top pick. Why is this? Is San Francisco such a bad destination? Are the Giants opposed to spending on a top 15 pick? Or is Farhan Zaidi incompetent? So I have kind of a bunch of thoughts here. Now, one thing I am going to say is I'm not a complete expert on the breakdown on how the international pool money is and how it's determined. I know it's based off of um, a variety of things. I mean, even like such as market size impacts it, and there's a variety of factors in there. So uh, if you go into like MLB.com, you can probably get the breakdown. I know the Giants were kind of middle of the pack in how much bonus pool money they had available, and they didn't. They did end up with two kind of lower ranked people. We want to put it that way. And then they signed 20 players. So I'm going to just give kind of my thoughts. And what I did do is I researched the last 10 years of Giants international signings and looked at kind of where each of these guys was ranked. I just wanted to see how many people in the top like 30 to 50 they had signed. And I think I did top 30 in each year's international for the last 10 years. And then I also went through those lists and I picked out kind of some notable names and looked at what those people were ranked. And you'll kind of find that you get some people all over. So I'm going to kind of answer some of these questions kind of one at a time. Now, one of the things the person asked was, um, kind of why is it that they didn't get anybody until you know ranked 36. Now, these players, the one thing I will say is a lot of these players teams have been building relationships with for years. It's different than normal free agency. It's not typically just like, hey, a team like came in, they threw a bid way over everyone else and they signed him. A lot of times these players have predetermined for years what team they're going to sign with. Not every player, but that is the case with a lot of them. And then if you just happen to get kind of lucky, you had a good relationship with a player that ended up being one of the top players, then you just end up with that guy. And that's kind of what happened with Marco Luciano, for instance, who is the second ranked player in his signing class, which was 2018. And the Giants had a great relationship with him, and they managed to sign him that year. So there are a lot of factors that go into this. Now, what I did see, and we're going to go through this list, is they very rarely are in the top 10. They've had three total players that were in the top 10, and two of them really haven't worked out at all. So, and Marco Luciano's the third, who's kind of, we'll see. Hopefully he's in the majors, so we're going to see. But so starting back in, well, actually, we'll start from this year and move back. So starting this year, they signed Yoandry Sanchez, who's a catcher out of Venezuela, who's 17 years old. The comp they gave for him is Gary Sanchez. So, that it's a power bat out of a catcher, solid defense. He was the 36th ranked international prospect. They also signed Johnny Lovell, who's a shortstop, who was the number 44th. He drew comparisons to Rafael Furcal. So also out of Venezuela. He's 16 though. So those were the two guys this year. Now going back to last year, they had the number 15 international prospect, which is Rainer Arias, who is currently their number 6 prospect. I would actually suspect he actually dominated the Dominican Summer League last year and they were talking about moving him up to the Complex League, and then he broke his wrist and only got like 59 at bats, but he actually looks like a stud. Um, we'll see. He's turning 18 this year. I'll be interested to see if they start him stateside or if they just have him do the complex league, or what the Giants decide to do with him. But that he actually looks like he could end up being a special player. In 2022, they got the number 9 prospect, which was Ryan Reckley, who was a shortstop. He has so far struggled in both the Dominican Summer League and the Complex League. Has not even hit above the Mendoza line either league. So lots of struggles from him. Kyle Haynes came out, said that, who's the Giants farm director, said that he is, he feels like the game is slowing down for him. He could just be blowing smoke, trying to give the guy confidence. It's hard to know, but he has struggled a lot so far. They also signed Juan Perez, who was a catcher that year, who was the number 30th ranked prospect, international prospect, who's also same boat, struggled in both. Not to be confused with Juan Perez, who was on the Giants 2014 championship roster. 2021, they signed the number 22 prospect, Diego Velasquez, who's shortstop as well. He's actually the Giants' number 20 prospect in their system at the moment. He hit 298 in single A last year, 125 weighted runs created plus. So he actually did pretty well. He's 20 years old. We'll see if he keeps progressing, but he had a nice season last year. 2019, 2020, it's a little odd. They only had really the one because of the COVID year. The signing date used to be in July, and it got moved into January during this time frame because of COVID. So they signed Esmerlin Vinicio, left-handed pitcher. He has struggled a bunch in A-ball for 2 straight years. Possibly, almost a 5 ERA this year. I don't know how much longer they're going to stick with him before they may just end up moving on off of that player. 2018, now this was the big one for them. This was probably the Giants' best international class so far that they got the most praise for. They signed Marco Luciano, who was the number 2. They signed Luis Matos, who was number 27 that year. They also signed Jairo Pomares, who's still in their system. He's like the 16th ranked prospect in their system. He was injured basically all of last season, though. Big power. We'll see what happens with him. He was in high A. And then they also signed Alexander Canario, who made his major league debut with the Cubs. A lot of you might remember he was part of the Chris Bryant trade in 2021 that went back, but he's got massive power too. So that was a big year. Now, but Luciano Matos were the 2 guys that were in the top 30 that year. Now this is where it gets kind of bleak. 2017, none. They had nobody in the top 30. 2016, none in the top 30. And then 2015, they signed Lucius Fox, who, aside from having one of the coolest names in baseball for the comic book people out there, he was a shortstop out of the Bahamas. He's kind of a 4A player. He was part of the Matt Moore trade in 2016, which worked out for the Giants that year, gave him some quality games, and before he left after the year, but he ended up ultimately making his major league debut with the Nationals and has been kind of a 4A player. I don't know how much longer he'll be in the league still, but he was actually the number 3 rated prospect that year for the international prospects. So now I'm going to go through some notables. This was starting back in, I'm actually going to go back a little further because kind of relevant to the Giants. 2002, Pablo Sandoval was he was an unranked prospect, international prospect that they signed. That one worked out for them. 2014, unranked, Ronald Acuna Jr. 2015, number 4 was Vladdy Jr. Number 22 was Juan Soto. And number 27 was Fernando Tatis Jr. So kind of interesting the year. They got the number 3 guy and 3 guys that were behind him that are pretty much superstars in today's game. 2016, the number 14 international prospect, Randy Arozarena. 2017, number 1 was Wander Franco, who that's no longer aging well, but he was a star in his time. And then number 9 was Julio Rodriguez. And then not a lot of guys that are really big notables in the following few years, but one that I saw, because mostly because we don't really know enough about them yet. And then in 2021, Jackson Churio was. I did not write down his rank. It looks like Jackson Churio was in 2021 the number 16. And he is currently the number 2 prospect in all of baseball, and just got an 82 million. I think it was $82 million deal from the Brewers. Might have been 84, but he just got an $80+ million contract from the Milwaukee Brewers, and he's probably going to be their starting, I think, center fielder this year. So those are kind of the notables, and what you see with that is just kind of like the draft and everything else. It's really a crapshoot. Just because you get the number 1 or top 10 guy doesn't necessarily mean that that guy's going to amount to anything. There's a lot of guys that have potential that are farther down, because the thing with these international kids is, unlike the major league draft, where you're getting even a high school kid, or a kid coming out of high school, a kid coming out of college, guys that you have much more information on, you are signing. I mean, these guys are building relationships with 13, 14, 15, 16-year-olds here to sign these kids out of Venezuela, Dominican, Panama, the Bahamas. So it's as big a crapshoot as any. And I think the biggest issue with the Giants, and this dates back, really, I mean, it's not just Farhan. He has struggled with it, but this goes back to Bobby Evans. This goes back to Brian Sabian. I mean, Sabian, it was notoriously terrible in the international market. Bobby Evans made a concerted effort to improve that, didn't hit on Fox, but then had a pretty impressive haul, looks like, in 2018. So, but Farhan, it remains to be seen. Rainer Arias, like I said, he looks like a player. We'll see if Reckley can turn it around. Velasquez looks solid, but more than any of the other, even more so, I feel like, than the draft, it's a crapshoot. But on the other side of this is the Giants have also just kind of failed miserably when it comes to signing players from Japan, until this year, players from Korea, or Cuba, the guys that defect from Cuba. They've really struggled on an international stage to hire or to sign these guys. So, as far as why, there's things out there about San Francisco being not a place that players want to go. There's a few Japanese players that have said they wouldn't. Yamamoto came out and said that it reminded him of home, and he would have signed here if his heart wasn't set on LA. I mean, he might have just been blowing smoke on that one, but I don't think it's an issue with spending. The Giants have forked out 2.6, 2.7, 2.3 million on different players here. I don't think they have an issue with that. So it's hard to tell now. Is Farhan incompetent? I mean, I think we all have kind of our opinions on that. For what I would say about Farhan is he has been very good in his time at finding good role players to fill out rosters, terrible at getting the guys at the top end. So he's got a lot to prove this year. Now, what I'm going to say is, and I retweeted this on my Twitter account today, Giants prospects made a post that for next year, there's supposedly the Giants are expected to sign shortstop. Now, I'm probably going to mess up the pronunciation of this, but Josuar de Jesus Gonzalez in the next international signing period. He is a player that is among the mix to be the top amateur international player in next year's class. So, and he would be the highest ranked since Marco Luciano, if that's the case. Now, no one knows. The rankings are always changing. He can end up being, 20th. It's just hard because as these kids' bodies mature, projections change. So, but supposedly very athletic, humongous power from both. He's a switch hitter with huge power from both sides. and they think that he projects as a plus defender. So if Zaidi signs him, coupled with like the Jung Hoo Lee signing this year, it could help change the way people view him. So that's kind of my thoughts on the whole international signings. It's just kind of fascinating to look at what they've done versus what some of these big names are. And there's probably more big names out there. I just kind of picked out the superstar kind of caliber players to see where they're ranked. It seems, like I said, it seems Giants are actively trying to be involved in this, but they just haven't had the success. So I don't know if it's an issue with their scouting. I don't know if it's an issue with just their development. Uh, but they just have not been able to develop that huge talent, that huge superstar talent out of their international players. I'm hopeful that Marco Luciano breaks that trend, and it might not be this year. I also think that of the Giants prospects, Rainer Arias is one of my favorites, top 2 or 3 that I really am excited to see what he does this year. So those are my thoughts. Just like this user, if you guys want me to answer any questions or do any videos on anything specific, anything you guys want to hear about, comment or put it in the comments, send me it on Twitter. Either way, I'll see it and I will happily make a video on it. So like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter at EYD Show. But until next time, bye.